Test, test. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. We've got about 5 more minutes till our meeting starts. And we've got a few more members still to join us, including our chairperson. So if everyone can hold tight, that'd be great.
Laura, can you hear me?
I can.
So are you going to kind of control if there anybody speaking? Is that what's going to happen?
So between both Danny and myself, yes. So when we have our applicant and need to bring him over, we'll bring him over as a panelist, so you'll be able to see the applicant. And then depending on when we get to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about how we are having people come on to be able to speak. There'll be slightly different things going on, and we have key slides to help work people through that.
Okay.
And it does look like you already have a quorum. So I know we will not be having Jeff, or at least Jeff didn't think he was going to be able to log on. He is traveling. And I think I saw, hold on, Neil needs the link. And then I think I saw Scott on earlier, and then he was back off again.
Scott was on and he's off now?
Yeah.
Okay.
He might have just logged back off.
We're going to need a secretary, I think.
Denise is logging in and will be listening. Oh, sorry, you need a secretary because you don't have Jeff.
Yes. Well, and we don't have Ann anymore either. I don't think we ever elected a secretary.
No, we didn't. So you could do that, or you could see if someone, I think Tony helped out with the last meeting.
I'm going to ask Tony.
Great. Okay. So I get to about the reading.
Should we be muting or just leaving us so we can speak over each other? I mean, I don't mind that.
I would suggest that people stay muted, only because what we will find is that your background noise will, try to keep muting and unmuting as you need to, but background noise from people's homes can make it a little more difficult, we found. Danny is upstairs in council chambers. I am downstairs in my office, and he's got the first half of the PowerPoint and I have the second half of the PowerPoint. So we're trying as best we can to work this out, but I think we'll be fine. I don't think we'll have any problems. So let's see, I just sent the link to Neil. Pam, I just see is on, and
Are people who I don't see, or they've just elected not to be video, they're just audio?
There are some people that have not put their video on, correct?
Okay.
Yep.
So these people that are on the right, they're all here, or I mean here virtually.
Everyone,
right?
who's listed on that you're seeing little images of, yes, they're here. Or there's an image with a name.
If there's no image, but they're listed, that means they're here?
That means
Or
they're
not?
here. Correct. Correct.
All right, well, we'll see how this goes. I got 1 minute to 7.
And we probably should wait until Neil gets on. I did just,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, I did just message him the link.
All right, well, we'll wait for Neil.
And if it takes him too long, we could at least start, because I would be able to, with Danny's help, he'll go to the next slide that talks to people who are listening in, what our procedures are going to be.
So am I going to do my spiel first and then you're going to do yours, or?
Correct.
Okay. All right. We'll wait a little longer for Neil. And Mara, you can hear everybody and you are always on. Is that right? You're always.
I do usually mute it at a key point, just, you know, in case something like my phone starts to ring, even though it's muted, things like that. I usually do mute myself in between, but I will be on and can hear and help move people over along with Danny. We're both listed as co-hosts of the meeting, which means that we can move people over as needed.
And the commission members aren't raising their hands to speak.
No, you're all listed as panelists, which means that you have the ability to speak. Hold on a second. Our applicant's calling. Hold on.
Danny, can you hear me? Can you introduce Michael at some point? Oh, I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Danny.
Sorry. Yeah, we'll probably do that at the end, just to sort of
okay.
Get our bearings to get this running straight, and
Okay.
And then at the end we can do some informal introductions. Would be a good idea.
And thank you for the packet.
Sure.
That was awesome.
There's a lot of reading material, so we thought it would be helpful.
Very helpful. Thank you.
All right, I've just moved Neil over and he is on. So if Charlie, you want to get started and get going, you're good to go.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Charles Sindel. I'm chairperson of the Webster Groves Plan Commission. We are a 9-member board of citizens appointed by the City Council to review development proposals and make recommendations to the City Council regarding future development of the city. In addition to the members of the Plan Commission participating via teleconference, we have a few other representatives of the city I would like to introduce. Council Member Pam Bliss, City Attorney Neil Brunschweiger, Planning and Development Director Mara Perry, and Planner Danny Jandusa, and Denise Buleski, who is our recording secretary. I would like to welcome you all to tonight's monthly meeting of the commission and take this opportunity to explain how we operate. As indicated in our agenda, we will begin with the regular session of the meeting when we will hear new applications for rezoning or subdivisions. We will hear a staff report and the applicant will explain the proposal. We will then ask for comments from the public. At that time, anyone with an interest in the proposal may indicate to city staff they have a question or would like to express their opinion by clicking on the raise hand feature on Zoom. To make sure that we accurately record your name, we ask that you identify your full name and address at the beginning of your comment. When you make your comment, we ask that you be as concise as possible and not repeat a point made by a previous speaker. We also ask that you limit your comments to 1 minute per person who is a spokesperson for an organization may have 6 minutes. I'm sorry, 3 minutes per person, or 6 minutes for a group. After all citizens have spoken, the applicant will be asked to respond to any questions that have been raised during the hearing. When we have finished reviewing one proposal, we will move on to the next application. Comments concerning items not on the agenda should be made during the public comment section of the agenda near the beginning of the meeting. When we have completed the regular portion of the agenda, we will go into executive session. At that time, the commission will discuss the proposal and may decide to vote on the application or to postpone the decision. You are welcome to remain and listen to the discussion, but there will be no additional opportunity for public comment at that time. Our recommendations are sent to the city council. In most cases, the city council will conduct a similar hearing and must enact an ordinance before the proposal is finally approved. If the plan commission takes a vote tonight, the city council will likely take up the issue at its first meeting next month. If you want information regarding our vote or the progress of the application, you may contact staff at City Hall. I would ask that the secretary read the first item for tonight's regular meeting.
PC, 20 PC 13 Pacific Place.
Hold on
Yes.
just a sec. Let's go to number 2, approval of minutes. Okay, Tony?
Okay.
All right, so are there any comments or questions about the minutes from the last meeting? That was July 6, 2020. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the July 6, 2020 meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye. How are we going to do that?
Aye.
Can everybody hear everybody? Aye. Is there anybody opposed? All right. Okay, now let's go on to public comments. Is there anybody who in the public who has comments about matters that are not on the agenda tonight? And I'm assuming that we have nobody.
It does not appear that we have anyone who's on to speak about something that's not on the agenda.
All right. Okay, Tony, now let's go on to number 4.
Do we do a roll call?
Well, let's do 2 things. One, Charlie,
Yes.
I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're handling public comment. And then Tony, we technically don't need a roll call because the way that this is recorded, it actually shows everybody who's in attendance. So that is our roll call.
Gotcha.
So we have a slide up right now that helps to describe how we are trying to do all of this with our virtual Zoom. We have created a new page on the website that allows people to be able to ahead of time let us know if they want to speak at a public hearing. We are using that in anticipation that if we can't end up having a public hearing that has a lot of people who want to comment, it would give us an opportunity to have them pre-register essentially and say that they want to speak. But we are also accepting any written comments. If we get a written comment in, we will read 3 minutes of it into the record if the person was not able to attend on Zoom. If someone emails comments, same thing would happen. And then we have the opportunity that someone can put their hand up in the Zoom meeting to request to speak. And we just do the reminder that I've already been stated that they can only have 3 minutes. Typically, we would then turn off the microphone essentially after the 3 minutes and wrapping up. And the order of the speakers is usually if someone is registered ahead of time, followed by written comments and then a hand up. Just so you know, we did not get any written comments or emails ahead of time. So it'll just be if someone does put their hand up and wants to speak. So we just wanted to kind of make you aware of that. And that's how we're doing meetings, items on the agenda that we want to potentially close the hearing. For any items which later I'll give a little bit more information on that we're asking not to close, we'll have a slightly different policy and we'll get to that when we get to those hearings.
Okay, we're ready to go now?
Yep.
Okay, Tony, can you read the first public hearing, please?
Yes. 20 PC 13 Pacific Place, an application by Webster Group 1 LP and MS Partners LLC for a change of zoning from B2 multiple family and commercial district to PC planned commercial district with on an approximately 1.25 acre tract of land located at 37, 41, and 45 through 47 South Old Orchard Avenue.
This is you, Danny, right?
Yes.
You're presenting this? Okay,
Yes.
go ahead, please.
So we are looking at the Pacific Place senior apartment development. located at 37 to 47 South Old Orchard Avenue. It's located south of the Old Orchard Business District, just south of the Old Orchard Shopping Center. These subject properties have been zoned generally under this zoning designation since the mid-'80s. Since the 1960s or so, there have been several variances, zoning actions, subdivision plats designed around making senior or allowing senior apartment living and mixed uses to operate at the site. Tonight, we're looking at a rezoning request from that B2 multiple family and commercial district to a new PC plan commercial district in large effort to sort of clean up many of the zoning ordinances that have been passed at this site over the years. This came to attention because the applicant was simply seeking to do a small expansion of an enclosed space in the interior courtyard of their properties, but finding that even that small addition set off a number of triggers and flags with prior zoning ordinances specific to the site. So we're looking at trying to sort of consolidate the different zoning ordinances that have been put into effect and provide a little bit of flexibility for future phases of development at this site. So the subject properties are located south of Old Orchard. To the north is the Old Orchard Shopping Center, that's Zone C commercial. To the east is a restaurant and parking use, Zone C commercial. To the southeast, it's the railroad tracks and Interstate 44. South of the subject properties is the Repertory Theater Apartments. They typically will rent out to visiting artists and performers for short-term housing. And then to the west is the Narings Hall High School Educational Campus District. So as I described before, in this subject properties history since the late 50s, a number of zoning ordinances, variances, and subdivision plats have been enacted seeking to allow senior apartments for older adults to be able to operate at this site. However, in the years between the late 50s and the mid 80s, a number of zoning actions were taken, but the site remained still largely undeveloped until the mid 80s. In 1985, the applicant tonight was able to rezone the subject properties from C commercial district to B7 multiple family and commercial district. This is a similar designation as it has today. It's simply under a different name. They were able to rezone that to construct the original Pacific Place apartment building for 30 apartments for seniors 55 years and older. At that time, they also obtained variances for reduced parking requirements because these units were supposed to be dedicated to seniors and to reduce setbacks from what was otherwise required on site. Here we have some photos of the existing conditions of the property, looking south on Old Orchard Avenue towards the subject properties in the sidewalk in front of the Old Orchard Shopping Center. On right-hand side, we're looking at a view from, we're looking northeast towards the Pacific Place apartment building. You can kind of see behind the trees. You can see that the subject properties are located in a sort of a challenging bend in the road at Garden and Old Orchard Avenue. Some specific setbacks were put in place in the 1980s to sort of accommodate for this and prevent visibility issues. We also have some views of the existing building referred to it by the applicant as the MS Partners building. It's currently a single story commercial occupancy. And then another photo of three-story building for senior living approved in the late 90s on the subject properties. The city looks to the comprehensive plan when reviewing a request for rezoning. The comprehensive plan serves as a guiding document to inform policy decisions and land use designations. The guiding principle behind the Webster Groves Comprehensive Plan from 1978 states that the general objective of the plan is the development and maintenance of a residential community. Zooming in on to the land use map amended in 2017, designating and recommending long-term land uses and future land uses, identified that these subject properties should remain multifamily residential for the future. We are looking at a rezoning tonight from the B2 multiple family and planned commercial district to a PC planned commercial district, which allows for integrated mixed use districts with greater flexibility to establish unique zoning parameters. According to the city code, the PC districts are to be developed according to a development plan, which should be referred to the City Plan Commission for study, public hearing, and approval. The applicant's preliminary plan has been included in the packets of information provided to the Plan Commission members, which we'll be kind of reviewing and analyzing going forward. The applicant, when forming a PC plan commercial district, the applicant is able to request permitted and conditional uses from the existing C and D commercial district regulations. The applicant has requested to be able to have up to 46 dwelling units for seniors ages 55 and older, and a number of commercial type uses from the C and D districts, all with similar profiles in terms of potential parking impact and externalities, public impact to the surrounding public. In addition, city staff recommended a few additional uses that sort of fit a similar profile as what was being requested. Several of the uses that the applicant has requested are already present within the district and in operation. Staff felt it would be appropriate to add a few similar to provide future flexibility for the site. There are 38 existing senior apartments reserved for adults ages 55 years and older on site. The applicant is requesting to expand that number up to 46 to allow for a potential future expansion of the MS Partners building, the one-story commercial building directly adjacent to the Old Orchard Shopping Center. Staff would recommend continuing to limit these apartments to adults serving ages 55 years and older. Staff would further recommend requiring all non-residential uses, the commercial uses listed before, to be limited to the first stories of buildings, and also to state that functions which would be typically accessory to commercial activities that have been ongoing, such as small events at the existing art gallery, staff would recommend for those to be allowed to continue. Looking at the dimensional regulations of the district, the PC plan commercial district doesn't have a set order of setbacks, height, and intensity regulations. The Plan Commission and City Council are given greater flexibility to establish those as appropriate into the context of the site and how it would affect neighboring properties. Looking at the setbacks that were requested, due to the sort of unusual shape and the history of the lot of the subject properties in terms of the setbacks that had been put in place, staff kind of looked at a very specific way to identify where setbacks should be in relation to the existing property lines, and we utilized the legal descriptions of the properties from the previous subdivision plats to tie the setbacks in relation to the property lines. But generally, we are seeking to allow any future expansion to meet the existing footprint of existing buildings, except for on lot 2, there was a recorded setback established to prevent visibility issues coming around the bend on Garden Avenue and Old Orchard Avenue. Because that is a recorded front yard setback, we'd be keeping that in place within the ordinance. The existing building, according to the survey, is already encroaching into that setback. It would be allowed to remain in place, but any future expansion or redevelopment of the properties would require that setback to be met. We would also be not recommending any internal building setbacks beyond what is required in the fire and building codes between the 2 lots within the district. Actually, I guess there's 3 lots within the district. I apologize.
Danny, is the middle building the largest one? Is that the one that's encroaching on the?
Yes.
Yeah.
You sort of see in the right-hand corner a little bit of overlap in the curved green line. And I apologize for that. The green is representing the recommended setbacks. Looking at height, the existing buildings within the district in past ordinance have been limited to 3 stories in height. At the Lodge building at 41 South Old Orchard and the Pacific Place Apartments at 45 Old Orchard, the applicant is requesting to be able to potentially expand the existing 1-story commercial building for additional senior apartments in the future. And they're asking to match that 3-story limitation. Staff would recommend continuing that 3-story maximum from prior ordinances. Staff also will look at regulations for the intensity of use of a site to identify whether it would be appropriate. 2 dimensions we look at are lot coverage and floor area ratio. Lot coverage is the percentage of the footprint of the buildings in relation to the total square footage of the lot. And we would you'd be looking for an upper limit on that, as well as a floor area ratio is a ratio of the total gross square footage of buildings in relation to the total square footage of the lot. The proposal would be the preliminary development plan, I apologize, with the expansion of the existing buildings would be looking for a 35.39 lot coverage percentage and a 0.96 floor area ratio. Comparing it to what the standard limitations would be in the B2 existing zoning, you'd be looking for, or the standard regulations require a max lot coverage of 30% and allowing a maximum floor area ratio of 1.5 to the square footage of a lot. Prior ordinances specific to these subject properties have already allowed an expansion of lot coverage beyond the 30% to allow a 34%. And to this point, the properties have been developed to a floor area ratio of 0.83, though that hasn't been specifically addressed within prior ordinances. The applicant is requesting a small increase in the total lot coverage, and that is tied to the community room expansion they are looking to do within the internal courtyard. That would be a small footprint expansion. But the applicant has identified the expansion of the 1-story commercial building for more apartments would be looking to keep the existing footprint, not increase the lot coverage. Within the context of the site, amongst other multi-story commercial buildings, the railroad tracks, the Webster University parking garage, other multifamily buildings, staff felt it was appropriate for this site to exceed what would be the typical maximum lot coverage to 36% and allow a maximum floor area ratio of 1.0. This would provide the owner with a little bit of flexibility moving forward in case they needed to do another small expansion somewhere. They wouldn't have to come back through this whole process. Looking at the parking, there are 37 existing parking spaces within the subject properties. Those are identified in kind of the pinkish yellow color. Then the applicant has obtained shared parking easement agreements with the Old Orchard Shopping Center for 12 parking spaces in the parking lot directly north of their properties for use by guests and residents and tenants of the office spaces. In the preliminary development plan, they are identifying that 12 additional spaces within the parking lot could be made available through a private shared parking agreement. Staff would recommend allowing the existing site to continue to operate as it has under prior ordinances. The applicant has been operating mixed commercial and senior apartments at this site since the 1980s. We have not received any complaints specific to their own usage and parking impacts in the area. So we felt it was appropriate to allow them to continue as they are. Should they expand in the future for additional commercial space or additional senior apartments, we would recommend keeping the 0.75 parking ratio for senior apartments and requiring 1 parking space for every 300 square foot of commercial space that would be added. The PC district does not have its own set of performance standards that we passed maybe last year that would regulate things like noise and smoke and odor of commercial and industrial type uses. So staff would recommend applying the performance standards from the adjacent C commercial district that businesses and entities in Old Orchard would similarly have to follow. Staff also just wanted to recognize that the renderings provided are just for conceptual design only, and the applicant would be required to go through full architectural review board for any building plans. Before I go into recommendations, are there any questions that Mara and I could address?
On the parking, these 12 additional spaces, is that going to happen anyway, or only if they put the 8 new units in? In our recommendations, we would not require it unless they were looking to expand their existing facilities. Okay.
Can't see if anybody else has questions. Please just feel free to unmute and call out. Okay, so seeing none so far, staff would recommend approval of the application of the rezoning and preliminary development plan. Should the Plan Commission wish to forward the request to the City Council, the recommendation, staff would recommend the repeal of the prior zoning ordinance that were made specific to the subject properties. There's one that should be excluded from here that I accidentally put in error. We'll be looking to repeal ordinance 7062, 7354. We would want to not repeal 7379, but ordinance 7871 and 7929 and ordinance 8626 should be repealed, and the following conditions should be put in place in their stead. All provisions of the city code shall apply except as expressly modified within the ordinance. When I was putting together the staff report, there was so many different zoning applications and so much activity going on. I accidentally included some recommendations from an earlier draft. So there are some strike-throughs through some of the items that were identified in the packet that was sent to you, and the strike-throughs represent changes to the recommendations that we're making now. Mara, would you want me to actually read through all of these uses for the record?
You don't need to read through all the uses for the record.
Okay. We would like to emphasize that non-residential uses should be limited to the first story. We would apply the C district performance standards. We'd set a maximum floor area ratio of 1. Would recommend setting a total site coverage to not exceed 36%. We would set a maximum height limit of structures to 3 stories. When we were looking at the parking, we realized for clarification purposes, wanted to modify it to state that we would be wanting the applicant to, maintain their minimum levels of their current parking, current parking, but that future development should meet those minimum parking ratios discussed earlier. We would want the structure to meet the.
Danny?
Yes.
I'm sorry, pardon me, it's my future. Could you back up a slide?
Sure.
Please? I was a little confused by this in materials. There's currently 37 off-street, there's currently 37 spaces on the site now.
Uh-huh.
And there's 12 in easements on the adjacent property.
Correct.
So previously in the materials, you said there'd be, so that's 49. There was also comment there'd be 12 more and for a total of 61.
Correct. So within the recommendations,
Say 61 spaces.
so within the recommendations, we're identifying that the applicant should keep their existing parking in place. That the
Hey, Danny, can we have Michael mute? Because I can't understand him.
Sure. Michael, could you mute your microphone?
I'm trying.
Okay. Thanks. There was some feedback there. So yes, so we want them to keep the 37 parking spaces they already have on site and the 12 that they already have under a shared parking agreement. But this is identifying that we would only want them to obtain those additional 12 or another number if it was necessary for expansion of the residential units or commercial areas in the district. So we wouldn't be requiring them off the bat to get those additional parking spaces secured. Because it's possible that they may not do any kind of expansion, and we would be requiring them to establish something beyond their current operations, which they've shown to be successful and sufficient.
Danny, assuming this gets approved, then what would they need to do to expand for 8 more units?
They would be required to provide documentation of shared parking agreements, identifying that they have secured rights to additional parking spaces, and any building permits to expand would be tied to their ability to meet the parking standards.
Do they have to go in front of the Architectural Review Board?
They would, but that would come after the planning director's approval of their parking.
The reason that we're involved in a rezoning is just cleaning up our maps, it sounds like. Is that right?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the last part.
The reason that we're rezoning is because we're really trying to make this property be what it's already was, which is sounds like a planned commercial, but they never were zoned for that. Is that right? Did they come and ask for this piece here?
Well, so Mara and I and the applicant had a few different meetings to discuss what their cleanest option would be, and we decided together that rezoning with standards that simplified things that they'd already been approved for, but just sort of consolidating it into one location would make the most sense. And they also then discussed their potential plans for future expansion that we wanted to include within this.
Are the parking, the additional parking, is that subject to commercial landscaping, or what kind of requirements for landscaping for parking would be?
If they'll be utilizing existing parking spaces in the Old Orchard Shopping Center, they would not be required to follow landscape ordinance. But if they were constructing new facilities for parking, either on their property or then yes, any new parking facilities would be required to meet the landscaping requirements.
Of the commercial district?
Yes. Well, our landscape requirements simply apply across the board for parking lots.
Which are usually in commercial districts, but this is a residential district. So.
Well, correct, but yes, they're the same for multifamily as they are in commercial.
Okay, I got it.
So, this is Mike again. I apologize for making peach stuff. See, I actually wear an implant here, so I don't necessarily hear it all well. So this ordinance you're recommending now is just for, in essence, what's there, I think as Charles put it. So would you, if they do the 8 additional units, you would have to redo the PC ordinance to the 60?
No, they would be allowed to do the 8 additional units under this rezoning ordinance. So currently they have 38 apartments. If they added 8 more, we are allowing that up to 46 on site with this ordinance if it is approved.
And by adding the new units, that automatically increases their parking requirements, correct?
Correct. Any other clarification?
Yeah, Danny, this is Chris. On this slide, when you're talking about the mixed use component on the first floor, is that what these uses in number 2 are talking about, or is this just for that entire site? So what would be in store for that first floor retail? Is that just the standard?
So yes, these uses, any of these uses would be available for the first story retail and commercial space.
Okay, so that's what number 2, is that what number 2 is showing?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Currently, they already have restaurant, office, personal services, an art gallery kind of use. The additional uses would be for potential future tenants. That would all be limited to the first floor with residential above.
Got it, thank you.
And then there was a few more items. These are standard code items that are already found within our building and zoning codes, but wanted to apply them to this district because it's got its own specific set of requirements. And there were a couple of items that I realized were carried over from a previous draft, which were unnecessary, so we strike them out. But we did want to verify that all mechanical equipment, trash receptacles, and outdoor storage should be screened with 6-foot height barriers, fences, or walls. And that concludes the recommendations. Were there any other questions?
So 18, is that covered in your performance?
18, I realized was duplicating number 17.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Danny, can you read that slide about the lot coverage and floor area ratio one more time?
The line to explain that, or did you mean item number
This-
4?
Sorry, the slide.
Oh, the slide.
Mm-hmm.
Is this what you meant?
I think the next one actually.
So currently the site is zoned B2. Those items up there, 30% and 1.5 would be, automatically allowed. The applicant, because of prior variances it's already obtained, has been allowed to go up to 34%. Due to what they're proposing, it's a small expansion in their interior courtyard. We felt it wouldn't really impact neighboring properties. We felt comfortable in recommending an expansion of that existing 34%.
Okay, thanks.
Danny, if I followed right, you mentioned a lot consolidation, but I don't believe I saw that in materials. Would the 2 lots be consolidated into the PC?
No, there are currently 3. I'm sorry, Michael, could you mute again? So there are currently 3 separate lots within this plat. The MS Partners building up in the right-hand corner is its own small lot. Sort of the building behind it is sort of in an L shape up towards Old Orchard Avenue. It is a separate lot, and then the large lot with Pacific Place and the cottages below is third lot within the district. We would not be requiring the applicant to consolidate the properties. They've explained that they would like to retain the option to possibly be able to parcel off, say, one of the buildings. The same regulations would still apply if there was 2 different owners owning facilities on the site, but it would leave them with greater flexibility to have a different ownership entities.
So what you're looking at there on your screen now is 3 lots?
Yes, there are 3 lots there.
Okay. So 3 lots in this lot coverage in the far we're talking about though is for the total of what you're seeing on that screen.
Yes, I think probably a better way to describe it maybe in this case would be site coverage rather than lot coverage.
Any other questions? Should we move on to the applicant?
Yes.
Brought the applicant over already.
Okay. I will close out my screen share because I believe the applicant may want to do so themselves. Mara, did you say that they were already?
I brought them over. They're unmuted now.
I'm sorry, let me introduce myself.
Are you or not?
Dave, please speak if you're available.
Put them to mute. Hello.
Hi, Dave. So you're on to talk now.
Thank you. Thank you. And by the way, it's not Neil in his cowboy hat. It's Dave Sanders. That was a really good and thorough introduction to something that we thought was going to be very tiny and not time consuming when we came in to see Danny and Mara about this little living room problem that we have. He was kind enough not to make it clear to you that the 1958 version of this property, which I was totally unaware of until we came to visit, was apparently far simpler than the complicated solution that Dave Sanders is presenting at the moment that nobody can understand, including our mailman. But the reason that we came in is that we've always had a relatively small amount of living room common area space in our building. That was done on purpose because we created something that we call urban senior living, where we view the Old Orchard Business District, the university, Naringsall, that's all part of our common area. Our folks come here so that they can walk to those things, participate in those things whenever they feel like it. They don't have to be driven there. Creates a very independent environment where there's a lot of age interaction, a lot of dining in restaurants and things of that nature that seem very natural and normal for them and their families. So our living room space has always been small. One of the things that drove this sort of to a point, though, was COVID. Years ago, when we added the 8 units in the lodge and the 2 cottages, our 500 square foot living room, which you can look at that plan that you have in front of you and see, became a little too small, even with that philosophy. We do nowadays use the Old Orchard Gallery as another 1,000 square feet of gathering space, but it's shared with people for art exhibits and public events and things like that as well. So we commandeered a 1-bedroom apartment and actually reduced our unit count by 1 in order to make up for that small living room that we have. But when COVID came along, all of these very, very independent people who were not required to eat in the senior dining room once or twice a day, they certainly use the Big Sky regularly, but when they choose to, and all the other restaurants here in town. Those people, those very independent people who were entertaining themselves out there in the community, all of a sudden were required to stay home. If you listen to the county, they were required to stay in their apartments, not have relatives visit. Meals became problematic in many places. And we discovered 2 things, that being small, 35 units, and having 8 or 9 courtyards or patios sprinkled around on our property, and good weather, fortunately it came as summer was approaching, that we've been able through this entire thing to let our folks go outside, be socially distanced at chairs and tables that we set up in advance, and they're told not to move them. And then their relatives can come and eat with them, visit, without going into our building or up into the apartments or the hallways or the elevator. So that outdoor space, combined with our small population, we do not have 100, 200, up to 500 independent units here to try to keep people from running into one another in the hallways, the elevators, and the dining room. But we realized that since they were staying here, we had to up our staff and we had to do more work to entertain them and help them get groceries, pharmacy deliveries, and all sorts of other things that we hadn't had to do prior to that. So we went to Mara and said, you know, we'd like to add a little sliver of space to our hallway, which is adjacent to that 500 square foot living room. It's almost entirely under roof already, and I think there is an image of that we can show in a minute if it helps. And we thought that by enclosing that area, we could give them a room that's probably about 2 or 3 times larger than the one we have at the moment, and give a little bit more space for people to spread out and distance and not have to be contained to an apartment if this sort of thing persists or if it were to come back again. And that's what set off the whole problem. Because when Mara went looking for what we've already got here and approved over these years, and I apologize for all that, but
we couldn't get all the land at one time, and our thinking changed over a period of time about certain things. We felt like it was probably a good idea for us, for maybe the city, and maybe for anybody that comes along after we're too old to do this in the future. So that's why we are here. Really, that's at the moment, that little bit of space is what we're wanting to address first and is the most important to us. The one-bedroom apartment that we decommissioned could probably become an apartment again, because at the moment we are in fact the smallest independent living senior building in all of St. Louis and probably most of the nation. And I know that because there are many large-scale developer people who talk to us and approach us regularly about this building, but we're pretty small for their formula. So, and we're the only one in the nation that has a public restaurant instead of senior dining room. That actually helped us greatly during the COVID experience as well. So I love being unique, but I apologize for doing it in a complicated way. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Sanders. Public comments? Mara, would you be controlling that?
I am controlling that. I only see a couple people on, and I believe they are here for some of the other items coming next. But if there's anyone who's on right now who does want to speak in regards to this particular public hearing, please raise your hand. I don't see any.
Well, in that case, I think I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing on, what is this, PC 20 PC 13. Is there a motion?
I motion to approve or to move on.
Close the public hearing?
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded to close the public hearing on 20 PC 13 Pacific Place. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Mara, do we want to go through a voice vote here one time?
You don't need to go through a voice vote to close the public hearing.
I'm sorry, we don't need to?
You don't need to close the public hearing.
Okay. All right, so we have closed the public hearing on 20 PC 13. And Tony, can you read the next item on the agenda, please?
20 PC 06, zoning code text amendments, 2-family residential. Proposed amendments include clarifications to the use and dimensional regulations regarding single-family attached dwellings and 2-family dwellings in the A4 7,500 square foot residence district in sections 53.070 and 53.100 and amended definitions related to these uses in section 53.020.
So I'm going to do two things. One, I'm just going to remind our applicants, because we hadn't had a lot of time to talk with Dave Sanders about our steps. We will have 3 more public hearings, then we'll go to closed session so that you can vote on both the item that was just closed as well as the 4th public hearing that we have on for tonight. These next 2 public hearings, what we're going to ask of you is that you hold these and continue them after we finished our presentations to the November 2nd, 2020 Plan Commission. What we are intending to do with this is to start opening up a discussion similar to some of the other code changes we've done in the past, where we're going to open up the hearing, start talking about key elements of the code, and discussing with you the options that we are thinking of to make some potential changes to the code. So the way that we're doing this format, we're going to ask that you don't take any public comment on either of the next 2 items. And the reason for that is to just keep it open so that we can make this available on the city website so we can get information out. I know there are a number of people who in the past had asked me when we did eventually talk about some of these code changes to our residential zoning that they be made aware. And I know it's very difficult in this time, even with the Webster Kirkwood Times now back up and running, to get that out there. So we will have the PowerPoint and the recording of this presentation available on the city website by the end of the day, Thursday of this week. And then at that point, when we continue in November 2nd, people can mail in comments, email comments, or submit comments to sign up to speak on our website. And then they can also use the hand up Zoom option when we get to that point. So I just wanted to let you all be aware of that particular item. So Tony had already read out the title for this first amendment. The reason why we started looking at some of our code amendments were multiple reasons. One is related to the fact that we are slowly losing some of our affordable housing in our community. More and more of our smaller homes are being torn down for larger new construction. In addition, looking at options that many communities are looking at across the country about providing more equitable housing, as well as making changes for inclusive zoning. Most of the cities that we found that are doing this are much larger transit-intense cities. Excuse me. They're not inner ring suburbs. So some of our examples that I think we've given you were Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle. When you look at the differences between what they're doing on a larger scale and then look at what we would be doing on such a small scale of only 23,000 plus citizens, it's kind of different and something that we need to look at. In looking at those changes, we need to make sure that we're addressing, if we make changes to the code, what the capacity of our infrastructure is for our local streets, for traffic and parking, as well as potentially the capacity of the utilities or city services. And those are important to look at. Now, one of the things that we started looking at was what are our various definitions in our zoning code related to single family dwellings, 2-family dwellings, and multiple family dwellings. The hard part with all of this is the fact that even though we have some of these definitions in the code, nowhere in our zoning does it allow us to have single family attached homes, and nowhere in our code, or very limited in our code, can we have 2-family dwelling structures. We do have a small scattering of multiple family areas, and then we have our single family. Excuse me. So one of the things that we looked at was that our A4 7,500 square foot residence district, which is in the darker yellow that you see on your screen, already allows for what is considered 2-family structures. However, it has such a limitation in it. It basically limits 2-family structures to only maybe 2 or 3 blocks out of all of these areas within our community. It limits to blocks that already have 2-family structures that have been approved, but because this was put in place in the 1950s, very, very few at that time frame 2-family structures were being allowed. So it continues to create that limitation that we do not have the ability to add additional density to our community within some of our more intense zoning districts. So we thought it might be important to look at some options. Our current regulations say that you can only have 2-family dwellings if 40% or more of the frontage on the same side of the street between 2 intersecting streets is already occupied by 2-family or multiple family dwellings. Again, that gives that limitation. There's a couple blocks over by the university that already qualify, and there's a couple blocks in North Webster that qualify. But other than that, there is virtually no other areas within the community that can provide a 2-family dwelling. By providing a 2-family dwelling or providing something that's attached, like an attached single family, onto these type of blocks, it would give the opportunity to have smaller scale housing, some of what we are losing today. It would also allow for potentially structures that would still stay within the volumetric scale of the rest of the character of a block, while still providing a little bit more density to it. But again, we still want to be very careful about thinking about our streets and what we can handle in terms of overall parking and cars. We're not really a heavily transit-oriented community, and due to that, we do need to make sure to look at that carefully as we're making these potential code changes. We did provide in your packet a lot of backup information that we thought would be some really great articles to read about some differences between what communities have been doing for inclusive zoning and what communities have been doing for affordable housing. In addition, we looked at what some other communities around us have when it comes to allowing for two-family and attached. And we put together a very brief with some red line, looking at what some of the very simple changes could be in order to continue to allow these additional potentially two-family or attached houses within our A4 zoning district. We figured we would start with this as the simplest one. It's very easy because it's already an approved use within that district. This could be a first step in making it a larger or greater element where you could get bigger in the way that you impact the going into some of the other zoning districts potentially in the future. So this could be a phased approach to how we update our zoning code. So one of the things that we did look at was, if we were going to do that, how would we look at the floor area ratio, again, to keep in the character or the volumetric space that we have within our blocks, and then still being able to provide that additional density. So what we're going to recommend, this was just a real early, let's open this up. We'd really like everyone to review all of the backup documents that we provided and the additional articles. And we're requesting that you keep the hearing open for us to take public input at the next meeting. And we will provide additional information with some other examples from other communities, as well as what we think might be some of the impacts that we need to look at. And again, I believe that this code amendment and the next public hearing are going to be ones that are going to take a number of months for us to just wrap our hands around what this impact would mean to the community, while still providing some new ideas on how to keep the diversity overall within both the people that can come and live here and enjoy our community, as well as those that can, how the diversity of the architecture will also be impacted in everything that we're looking at in terms of this code amendment. Before I move on to the next one, does anyone have any questions or things? Again, we're not taking public input at this time in regards to this, but we're definitely open to if there's a few things that you'd like us to bring back to you at the next meeting.
Mara, it's Mike, your chair. I appreciate the thought, the diversity in housing. And I noticed you talked about the FAR changes and setback changes. Looking through the materials provided, which provided, I didn't see anything about density on the lot, and it seems like if you're trying to get through this issue, as one of the articles you included said, the only way through the riddle is density. We're thinking in particular of the 40%, I believe, is on that particular use, the A4, 40%. Was there any thought given to looking at that density number?
I think what we found is that that 40% was limiting, so people couldn't put the two-family structures there. What our intent is, we're not going to put a requirement that you have to have a certain amount on that lot. We might want to look at what it's going to mean if an entire block did get taken over, what that impact would be on parking and on just overall traffic on the blocks. But that's something that we would continue to talk about for next month.
Mara, do we need a motion to hold the public hearing open and continue this to the next meeting?
Yes, we would.
Is there somebody willing to make that motion?
Or motion to keep this open and continue at the next meeting.
Second,
Is there a second?
second,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. It's been moved and seconded to hold open the public hearing on 20 PC 06 until the next meeting of November 2nd, 2020. Is there any, all those in favor signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Okay, move on to the next item. Tony, please.
20 PC 07, zoning code text amendment, residential dimensional requirements. Proposed amendments include changes to sections 53.043, 53.053, 53.063, and 53.073 to clarify lot coverage and height regulations in the A1 through A4 residence districts, and amended definitions related to the dimensional regulations in section 53.020.
So for some of you that were at one of our previous meetings earlier in the year, we gave you a quick heads up that this was something that was going to be coming before you. Back in 2006, there were a series of amendments made to the zoning code. At that time, the focus was related to garage dominated street facing frontages and not allowing or trying to not allow front entry garages in many of our, that were sort of changing the character of many of our streets. There were homes that were sort of looming larger over neighboring homes, so regulation on how large that would be, as well as detached garages that were getting so large they were basically 2-story and larger. In 2017, some of you were on the Plan Commission at that time, we made another series of code amendments. It took us about 18 months to get it through Plan Commission and into City Council. Our focus at that time was looking more closely at our floor area ratio, also looking at the height of structures and the definition of what a half-story was, because we do allow 2.5-story structures. And we also looked closely at our zoning code definitions. Based on both of those changes, we have found that we are still seeing some very large intensity to the new homes that are being built, as well as to some very large additions going on to existing structures. So just as an FYI, this is something that we'd shared back in 2017 when we were making these code changes. We had done a chart that identified how many ARB reviews we'd had, how many historic hearings we had had, and then how many new homes were approved. And you'll see that after the 2006 changes, a lot of things had changed in terms of new homes that got approved. There was, a slowdown in the economy at that time. And that slowdown started bumping back up in 2014, 2015. That is when staff made some changes and suggested that we really needed to talk about code amendments. Those code amendments were approved in 2017. And as you can see, 2017, 2018, and 2019, those were our three highest levels of new home construction that we had had. And then if you see on the top of my slide, I gave you a quick little heads up on 2020. First 9 months, even with COVID, we have approved 17 new homes, and we have 7 more that are in review or going to ARB. So nothing has slowed this down. And we're getting more and more questions, concerns, complaints regarding the fact that on many of the smaller sized lots, undersized lots, the homes are using sort of the minimum amount, or I should say the maximum amount that they are allowed in order to build a house that absolutely goes to the exact number that is the maximum that the house can be constructed. And so what we have found is, as a reminder, this is floor area ratio. The floor area ratio is a ratio of the lot size in relationship to the square footage of all levels of the house. So we take that ratio and we create a number out of it. Back in 2017, we lowered those ratio numbers to try to make them a little bit smaller so that the overall houses were not so big. And at that time, we also tried to minimize For undersized lots, you were still guaranteed a certain minimum house size, even if your lot was too small. And so what ended up happening is that we ended up finding that a lot of the numbers of houses that came in that were meeting this overall number was increasing even more, even after our code changes. This is just another description that helps explain that, you know, if you had a 10,000 square foot lot and our original floor area ratio before we made changes in 2017 was 35%. So you would typically be able to see a 1-story house on a 10,000 square foot lot that was only 3,500 square feet. If you had a 2-story house, you can see it's a very different configuration of what gets covered. And that's how the floor area ratio helps us to work out those calculations. Here's some data that we gathered from 2017 through 2019 to help give you a better sense of what was going on when it comes to, even though we made the code changes, this is still what was happening. We had 37 homes that had a floor area ratio of less than 25% that were built between 2017 and 2019. 12 of the homes had a floor area ratio between 25 and 30%, and another 24 homes had a floor area ratio between 30 and 40%. In most cases, those were undersized lots that were using the, you are guaranteed to build at least, you can build at least this large. So if you see this here, 15 homes use the base allowable square footage of building at 2,600 square feet. And then we had another 3 that built at 2,800 square feet, which meant the floor area ratios were between 32 and 40%. 31 of the homes were less than 2,600 square feet, but as you can see, 24 other homes ranged from 2,600 to 4,750 square feet in terms of new home construction. 24 of the homes were built on lots less than 9,000 square feet. The floor area ratio ranged from 19.9% up to 39.1%. The square footage of the houses ranged from 1,400 square feet to 3,000. Only 6 of the new homes of the 73 that were approved between 2017 and 2019 were less than 2,000 square feet. And when you think about that and the average home size or the home size of, you know, a family, a young family starting out, you're typically looking at something that's more like a 1,400 to 1,800 square foot house, and even that's on the large sides. So this was of a concern that most of the houses that were being demolished were the homes that were between, say, 900 square feet and about 1,400 square feet, and in their place are being built 2,600 and 2,800 square feet. Just as a reminder, I like to go through this to remind you the differences between our zoning districts. Our zoning districts have a series of minimum widths, minimum lot square footage, and a series of setbacks. Each of those is based on the overall lot size. When the zoning was put in place, a lot of our community was already built. So there are many zoning districts that were put on top of substandard lots in order to not do a patchwork of an A4 next to an A3 next to an A2. So larger swaths or areas of the city were zoned all at one time. So we do have a number of what we would consider smaller substandard lots that don't meet all the regulations. But just for example, the A1 zoning district has 12-foot side yard setbacks, 100-foot minimum lot frontage onto a street. The front setback varies based on the lot, and the rear setback is between 30 and 40 feet. They do have to have a minimum of 20,000 square feet for that lot size. In the A2, it goes down to 15,000 square feet. Side yard setbacks change to 10. Minimum width across the front is 80 feet, and the rear yard setback again is between 30 and 40 feet. Front varies. In our A3, it goes down to the 10,000 square foot lot, requires a minimum of 70 feet, has 8-foot side yard setbacks, and has a 30 to 40 foot rear yard setback with the front varying. Our smallest of our zoning district is the A4. It has a 7,500 square foot minimum. The rear yard setbacks between 25 and 35 feet. It's supposed to have a minimum of 60 feet, and then it has 6-foot side yards. Just as a reminder, in our community and the way that most of our area or city was platted, it was platted in the 1800s. Many of the plats were done on an increment of 25 feet. So they started with 25-foot lots. Most of the lots ended up being 50-foot wide lots or 100-foot wide lots. We don't have 60-foot lots. So most of our development, when someone does tear down a new house, it's very often in the A4 district a 50-foot wide lot. And they are guaranteed to continue to build because it was a legal lot. So you do have a tighter nature to how close they are to one another. And then the overall volume of them, with houses that were built maybe of a smaller square footage in the 1920s, 1930s, that are now having larger houses next to them. So one of the things that we wanted to point out, you can see, for example, we have a couple slides here. We have houses on the top that are complete, and then I went ahead and put some of them under construction. You can see, and I put a red line, this is the height of the roof of the house next door. So this is the new construction. In this lower one, you can see that there is the roof of the house next door. Same thing with this one here, new house constructed here, roof of the house next door. Now, I don't want to say that we should allow people to be able to build up, and people should, even if they have a one-story house, be able to build a second story or a half story. But the hard part is that because the houses are going as large as they are, and in many cases we do have property that is sloped, you might have a house that sits up on the hill, and the next house down, in addition to being only a one-story, sits maybe 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 feet below, due to the fact that the topography makes those kinds of changes. So we wanted to kind of think about some recommendations. And for those of you that have been on the board recently, we had a lot of, I thought, very productive conversations on both our parking code amendments and our home occupation amendments. What we did is we brought it to you sort of in pieces, and we kept talking about, here's what the code says, here's some options that other communities have come up with, and then tried to narrow that down to what both staff felt was maybe a good direction to go with the code changes, as well as getting as much input as we can from any community members who would attend any meetings. But here are the things that we're really thinking are the important ones to think about, so that you can think between now and the next Plan Commission meeting in November. We'd like to lower the guaranteed square footage for lots that are substandard, that do not meet the 7,500 square foot minimum. We'd like to potentially look at lowering the floor area ratio for some of these homes. Again, I know there were a lot of conversations of, well, if someone lives in a house and they live here now and they want to build an addition, we understand that. But at a certain point, building the addition, it becomes too much. It's trying to fit, you know, a square peg into a round hole. That lot size is only so large, and as you continue to build onto it, it's causing problems related to stormwater, it's causing problems related to traffic, to parking, and all of those things, you know, really mean that you're trying to overbuild onto something that maybe can't handle that type of intensity. We want to look at the calculations for finished floor requirements on sloped lots, which is where these houses are now sort of towering over other houses. And we want to review the half-story calculation again. A few years back, staff had recommended a calculation where the half-story was 50% of the footprint below. And our concern is that that was changed to 75%. And so it's really increasing for those lots that are sloped, that half-story has become pretty large. So I'm going to request we keep the public hearing open for continued discussion. I'm going to mute myself for just a minute. They're cleaning at City Hall and I can hear the vacuum, so I'm going to close my door. But I'm listening, and I'm going to try to mute myself. Hold on.
Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Mara?
Not at this point.
I think this is, I'm really happy that we're bringing this back up again. And I really, Mara, I appreciate it. And Danny, the new house approvals, I don't know what page that is, but that is really interesting. So just all of, yeah, I'm really glad that we're bringing this up, because this is super important. So thank you.
All right, is there a motion to continue the public hearing to November the 2nd on 20 PC 07?
I motion to move it to the next meeting.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to keep the public hearing open on 20 PC 07 to November 2nd, the next regular meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Okay. Can you read the last item on the agenda, please?
20 PC 12, sign code text amendment, political signs. Proposed amendments include changes to section 54.088 of the sign code in order to clarify regulations upon the placement of political signs on public property.
So I've got this one too. For those that had not heard, there were some questions and concerns during the last election in the spring in regards to political signs on public property. The way our code currently reads, political signs are supposed to be located entirely on private property. And then there is a set of calculations that relate to making sure site distance triangles being met. And then it says that they can be allowed on single family and commercial use properties. What we had found was that, of course, is not in keeping with what the state allows in terms of polling locations on polling day. And so we wanted to make sure that that got clarified prior to this upcoming election. So what we are proposing is that we would make these particular code changes, that we would say that political signs, with the exception of those on election day, shall be located entirely on private property in compliance with the sign type. On election day, political signs may be located on the property of polling locations, a minimum of 25 feet away from the outer door of the building in which the polling place is located, and no sign shall be allowed in the right-of-way adjacent to polling locations. So this is in keeping with what the state already requires to keep you at least 10 feet away from the door for both electioneering and the signs. It also keeps them from being put in the right-of-way, which is against a lot of our code regulations and can also cause site distance issues and other issues. And then we would leave the rest of that code section in place. In addition, there's an additional section in our other conditions under the political signs code that talks about the time frame of when they are allowed to stay up and when they have to be removed. So what we're going to recommend is that, with the exception of polling places on election day, political signs shall not be erected or affixed on or to any public property. Political signs shall not be erected or affixed in the right-of-way or on utility poles. In no event may political signs be erected or fixed by any person on or to any property without the consent of the owner or occupant of such property. So this first section is still keeping the idea that you can't just go to a city park and put political signs into that land. You also can't go onto some person's property and put it on, and you also can't attach political signs to utility poles and other things within the right-of-way. But we would add a section, so that's with the exception of polling places on election days, so that it allows them to be on the public property. At the bottom, we have all signs at polling locations are allowed from 8 p.m. the day prior to the election until 7 a.m. the day following the election. We found that a lot of staff time goes into removing all the signs because no one comes back and removes them the next day. And so we really do need to make sure that it's very clear that they get removed the following day. So I'm available to answer any questions if you have any questions regarding this.
There's a provision in there about how early you can have them up, isn't there?
There actually isn't. There was a question at one point about whether you could have them up early. It just simply says that if it's concerning election, they have to be removed within 10 days after the election. I thought there was one too, and I went looking for it and I couldn't find it.
I mean, I guess we're just very civil here. It's kind of 30 days is kind of like our limit of signs.
And that's what I kept looking for. In my mind, I remembered 30 days and I didn't find anything.
And is that okay with everybody?
The hard part relates to the definition of political signs. So the problem is political signs actually cover a lot of different things, including things like
Propositions and all that stuff.
a lot of other, yeah. So the definition, sorry, I thought I put the definition on my PowerPoint, but I think I only put it in my report. Let me give you the definition, and the reason why I didn't want to put an additional thing related to the election. Political signs are any sign advocating or opposing any political proposition or expression protected by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, or any candidate for public office. So I kind of wanted to leave this as open as possible. But if it's related to a particular election, they do need to be removed within a certain time frame.
I gotcha.
So basically, people could have a political sign up for 12 months of the year.
Technically, yes.
And that's probably constitutionally required.
Correct.
All right.
Mara, was there something that spurred this?
Yes, there was. Someone did try to remove signs from a public place from multiple candidates, not one particular candidate. And that's when the question came up. And that's when we looked and realized that we hadn't made any exceptions for election days. We knew that it was in the state regulations, but we didn't have it in our codes.
Okay.
Mara, I had a quick question. I'm just thinking about some things that are more like local here, like increasing funding or taxes to fund the fire department, for example. Is the fire department itself considered public property? And aren't those up?
I would, I'd have to check. I don't know. And again, sometimes people put them up without asking. And we usually try to remove things like that. Typically, unless it's a poll, you know, we try to make sure that they are not up on our public property.
So Maddie, this is Neil. So the public property that we're talking about is city property. So for instance, if there was a polling place at a school, this wouldn't apply to that because it's the school's property, and that is for our purposes, that is like private property. So this would be only polling places that belong to the city itself. And there's a question mark, I guess, in my mind, and I actually have to research this, about whether it would apply to the library, because the library is actually a separate entity as well. And the incident that Mara is talking about actually occurred at the library. So there are also state election laws, by the way, that have to do with the removal of the signs and that sort of stuff. But in the question that Mara is raising, and these things are things that needed to be cleaned up. We just didn't have much clarity on, you know, again, how long they can go up, and the fact that they can even go up at all, because the guy who was tearing them down was saying, you can't have these on public property. Well, the answer is you can. You know, again, it's just, this is clarifying what that means.
Well, I understood Maddie's question to be, could the fire department do, there's an issue to have a increase in say taxes so that they can get a pay raise. Can they put a sign up on the fire department property?
You could put, I believe you could put an educational sign up on property, and you could do it for the purpose of, again, for educational purposes. They can't put up a sign that says vote yes, because Hatch Act prohibits that, even though our current government in Washington, D.C. doesn't recognize that. But in fact, the Hatch Act would prohibit you saying vote yes, but you could put an educational sign up. So it'd be a little bit different.
Okay, you know what? My question was probably not really related to what we're exactly trying to push through here. I think it was more out of curiosity. So thank you, Neil, for the clarification.
Sure.
Okay, anybody else have any questions about this ordinance?
Mara, for the, I don't know if this is something we would want to like talk about now, but under like other conditions for number 3, I think that like all signs at polling locations are allowed from, it says 8 to 7 or to 8 to 7 a.m. Can we make that a little bit more flexible? I think that might be a little bit restrictive for people. But I don't know if we're talking about that now, those specific changes.
That would probably be a conversation for your deliberations on voting.
Okay, okay.
And, you know, again, it comes down to the public locations. This is really just everyone putting all their signs up at the rec center and maybe the library. I mean, really, it comes down to, at this point in time, this isn't the churches, this isn't the schools. They deal with the school district. So it's really us. And we don't really want people putting all these up all over the rec center for a long period of time. We would recommend 8 p.m. the day before the election. They can go out and put those up, and then they have to clean them up at 7 a.m. the day after the election.
And I think those times are pretty common. I think that
Are
those
they?
are,
Okay.
yeah.
Seems so early. Okay.
Well, if you've won, you could just take them down on your way out.
Yeah.
Well, speaking as a candidate, you know, you pick those up the night of the election. Somebody's assigned that when your team and your sign team, you
Yeah.
have somebody that night that picks up signs the
Okay.
night of the election.
You must have a good sign team.
I know I've never had that happen. No. Okay. My other question would be, is public property like, so when I'm driving on Elm on the right, by Glendale, there's that little garden.
That
There's always,
does not allow for political signs.
so that would not be political signs right there.
Nope, that is designated specifically as a location for special activities signs.
Okay.
You have to get approval by us in order to put them up, and they are limited in their time frame. So you'll typically see a green sticker. That's our approval for them to put signs in that location, as well as there's 2 other locations at the intersection of Rock Hill and Lockwood, as well as over near Brentwood at the new trail crossing.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
That's another section of the sign code.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I noticed there was more like soups and stuff like that, like garden sales, but okay. I was just wondering.
Okay, anybody else? I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing on 20 PC 12.
Motion closed.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing on 20 PC 12. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone opposed? All right, let's have a motion to move into executive session.
I'll make a motion to move into the executive session.
I second.
Been moved and seconded to move into executive session. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Tony, can you read the first item on the executive session?
20 PC 13 Pacific Place, an application by Webster Group 1 LP and MS Partners LLC for a change of zoning from B2 multiple family and commercial district to PC Plan Commercial District on an approximately 1.25 acre tract of land located at 37, 41, and 45 through 47 South Old Orchard Avenue.
Anybody have any comments or discussion on this 20 PC 13?
I'm all for it.
Problem with staff recommendations?
Yeah, it all makes sense.
Anybody want to make a motion to approve 20 PC 13 with staff recommendations?
I motion to approve.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve 20 PC 13 with staff recommendations. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I think we're going to have to do by Mara, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what did you need?
We're going to vote by person here. We're going to.
Oh, yes, go ahead and take a vote and go through each of the members and ask them to vote.
Okay, let's see, Michael, how did you vote?
In favor.
Tony,
Yes.
Annie,
Yes.
Maddie,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
That's all we got here. The chair voted aye.
Did you already do Christopher and Scott?
I don't see him up here.
They're both on here.
Hey, Scott, how did you vote?
Yes.
And Chris, where are you? I don't see him up here. Oh, there you are. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Christopher.
Yes. Yep. Aye.
Okay. Next item, please.
20 PC 12 sign code text amendment, political signs. Proposed amendments include changes to section 54.088 of the sign code in order to clarify regulations upon the placement of political signs on public property.
Discussion?
Annie, do you want to discuss those times?
I just think that, like, after people, because I know, Tony, you have an awesome campaign. I'm trying to find my paper for this. Okay. Tony, you have an awesome campaign that they can get that done in one night, and not be like celebrating. But I know Neil said those times are pretty standard, but I think that we could make them a little bit more flexible. I mean, it's only a couple of hours. I wrote down, that's why I couldn't read it, because I had already changed it with my pen. I had written down 7 p.m. the day prior to the election day until 9 a.m. the day following the election day.
I will tell you, the rec center will ask you not to change the next morning. They have, there's stuff everywhere. It's a tripping hazard. They would ask the 7 a.m. be pretty strict because they open at 5:30, and they end up sending people out there to clean up because it's a mess.
Really?
Yeah.
Just the political signs are just a mess? Like.
Yep.
So who would enforce that, Mara? Would that be just the city, some kind of city role?
Yeah, it would be a city role. We would give a reminder to candidates that they need to take them out. We would give them a reminder as they're there, just to get them back into a mode of, hey, you need to remove these.
So ultimately it's going to come down to the candidates to be responsible for it?
Yep.
Mara, if they don't remove them by a certain time, what will happen?
At this point, we're not going to do anything huge, but we're just trying to get them and encourage them to remove them.
Okay. Or would you just,
it's rec center staff time right now. The rec center staff have to go out there and clean it up. And it's hours that should be spent on our residents instead of cleaning up something that people should have removed themselves.
So Annie, the other thing that it does is that if you haven't picked it up, it makes it fair game to throw it away. A lot of candidates want to reuse their signs.
Right.
So, again, they don't want them thrown away. So this would be a situation where if you're not attending to it and you ever intend to run again, you want to make sure you're going to lose those signs.
Right.
So it does have an economic consequence if you don't do it, if those things get thrown away.
Right. No, that makes sense.
Yeah. I also think having a time, and if you know what the time is, that way you aren't quite so lackadaisical about it. If you know you have to get it out of there at 7, you get it out of there at 7.
Yeah, as long as they know, right? Do they know? Will they know ahead of time, Mara? I don't know how that works.
We'll figure out a way to make people aware of the code change.
Okay.
I didn't think I cared about the time, but since we're talking about it, can we make it maybe just a little earlier the day before so that people have daylight?
I'm sorry, say it again.
I just recommended maybe we made it a little earlier the day before so that there's still daylight because it's already dark by 8 p.m. I can take it or leave it, but since we're already talking about the time, that's my only thought.
Neil, any thoughts?
Well, again, for your November election, it's going to be dark no matter what you do. If you made it 5 o'clock, it's going to be dark, right? So again, for the same reasons that I'd want them out early, I wouldn't want them there any sooner than they needed to be there. I think the idea behind 8 o'clock is that the business is sort of shut down. Well, the rec center is sort of slowed down, at least at that point. Yeah. I mean, look, it's a matter of a personal call, I guess. It doesn't make much difference one way or another. But I think most campaigns are set up to do this. They know, for instance, at polling places, you don't get there until late in the evening, and you put everything up and you take it down the next night. I think these are pretty standard operating procedures. And I don't think anybody's going to feel like they're particularly burdensome with the numbers that Mara's given. Now, again, it's up to you all to make your recommendation. And I certainly understand, trying to accommodate as best you can. But I think people have been working with these numbers for a very long time.
Okay, so these are the numbers they've had. It's just kind of like now it's official.
Yeah, now what we're doing is really kind of putting it on paper.
Pam, what
Which
do you
again,
think?
based on what has happened, I think is not a bad idea. Let's make sure everybody's aware of the rules of the game.
Do we have any enthusiasm on the Plan Commission for changing the times?
Pam or Tony, like, are the times, do those seem doable? I mean, I know it's so last minute to like rush around during that time, so I just I don't know.
Well, I mean, for picking them up, I mean, technically you just assign the last person at the polling place. Hopefully somebody's there till the polls close. They take the signs.
Okay.
And then the day before, I mean, we are only talking about like 2 locations. So.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's just
Those are just the last.
It's not,
Yeah, those were just the
public.
last 2 you hit. Those are the last 2 you put up. Of all the places you have to go, those will be the last 2.
Okay. Okay. So that's helpful to know all that.
Yeah. I mean, it's logistics, but it's not difficult.
Okay. That was helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I take it we are not going to have an amendment to this ordinance, is that correct? Somebody wants to make an amendment, they should probably do it now. All right, well, I'll entertain a motion to approve 20 PC 12 as written.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve 20 PC 12 as written. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And we'll make a roll call here. Michael, how'd you vote?
Well, yeah.
Steve?
Yes.
Christopher?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Maddie?
Yes.
And the chair voted aye, so that has passed. Next item on the agenda, please.
Other business?
So at this time, I don't think I have any other business. We did not have any new applications arrive. Today was the deadline. And so we will just be continuing the 2 residential amendments. And I'd ask if anyone thinks of anything that you would like us to do additional research on or bring forward, just shoot us a quick email. But we'll be working on some things between now and the next meeting with some additional information. And again, kind of pulling the ordinance apart of the key code sections that we think are important to start discussing. And we'll do that at the next meeting.
Mara, can you tell us what's going on with the Region Bank property on Lockwood with that second building?
Yes, so the second building, their plans are in and basically have been approved and ready to go. However, they would like to put a coffee shop in the front portion of it. It's about 1,000 square feet or less. And in order to do that, they have to make an amendment to the ordinance that you all approved. Because it's a pretty minor amendment with just the one use that's in keeping with the same parking and other things. It's going before City Council tomorrow night for an amendment to their ordinance. And they will be heard in regards to making that change. If they get that change approved, they're going to move forward with starting the construction of office for the back 2/3 with a coffee shop use in the front.
At what point, Mara, would that change have to come before us, or would it have to?
Typically, if it had been something that was a use where it was going to have an impact on the parking or the preliminary or the approved development plan, because the same numbers that are needed for the coffee shop use were needed for the office use, it wasn't impacting anything else that was built or approved. And so staff deemed it as a minor change. If the council tomorrow night says, oh, nope, we think it's a major change, they can send it back to you. But it gives their discretion to start with my review and determining that it should just go straight to council.
Okay, thanks.
And then can I make just a quick announcement, Mara?
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to update you all that we have a more robust communications portal on the website about the redevelopment. It's webstergroves.org/redevelopment. And there are links to all the documents so far for the redevelopment of Old Webster, that area around Pacific. And there's a leave a comment button if you'd like questions or comments to mayor and council. Those are going to be collected twice a week and sent to us. And then thirdly, there is an extensive FAQ section. So just wanted to get the word out.
Thank you.
Mara, oh, sorry. Mara, will that be coming before us at some point, I assume?
You are correct. And when we're able to give you just a time frame, but we're not there yet, but it will come before you all for a rezoning.
Okay.
So you would have a public hearing in regards to a rezoning of the property.
That's really exciting. And then El Macaron, are they opening up or?
So right before COVID and due to COVID, they lost their original funding. They have a new funding source and they still plan to open.
Oh, good. Good.
So yeah, for a couple updates on those, Le Macaron should still be opening at some point in time, but they had to get new funding. Forenza Pizza and Ziggy's Frozen Treats is not able to continue to reopen. Are trying to resell it, and I've heard they might be selling the franchise to someone else who will operate it, but we're still waiting to see on that.
Okay.
O&O Pizza did open in the old Olive and Oak location. We also have a new business going in. Union Studio is going into Old Orchard. It's a business that sells things that are local artists in St. Louis. Things like pottery, artwork, clothing, jewelry. They have a location in the city. There's also another place going in next door to it that's, I think it's called Dwell and Dharma or Dharma and Dwell. They refill items, hair products, lotions and other things. And you bring your containers in, that you start with a set of containers and they refill the containers so that you don't have to keep using plastic. They're going in also in Old Orchard. And then Frisco Bar Room has their new annex location, which is a coffee shop and bakery that's opening next to Frisco Bar Room.
Wow.
And I feel like I have a couple more, but I can't remember them right now.
That's so exciting.
Oh, I know. Gorilla Street Food is reopening with a new menu tomorrow. That was on KSDK today.
Wow. Oh, and the new Parkmore.
The Parkmore, yeah, that's been open for a while.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. And then this morning, the brewery behind Olive and Oak were getting their big brewing vats, metal things delivered. And so Lockwood was closed this morning for a large crane.
Wow.
And it's pending tasting by the city attorney.
Yeah.
Okay, our next regular meeting is November 2nd. I assume that we're going to be virtual for that.
We are going to remain virtual for November and December at this point, just due to so many different factors. We have found that if we bring even just partial groups into City Hall, we have sound issues. As if we didn't already have some sound issues, it's even more problematic and when we kind of split our group. So at least for the next couple months, we will still remain virtual, and we'll try to continue to be as accessible to people as possible in allowing people to come in and talk at public hearings.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Mark.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Mhm. Bye.